Today we have Mene Dogucu. Mene Dogucu is an assistant professor of teaching in the Department of Statistics at the University of California, Irvine. She has taught statistics and data science at liberal arts colleges and research universities. She is here to talk about AI-assisted fair and efficient grading in the statistics and data science classroom. Mene, please take it away.
So as Megan mentioned, I did teach at research universities and liberal arts colleges. And the reason I mentioned that is because the type of grading I have done has varied a lot. And I wanted to start with a few icebreakers related to assessment and grading about me. I did teach a semester-long course on assessment to pre-service teachers. And I did teach at a college with no letter grades. And at another time, I'm happy to talk about this experience. I think it was really informative for me about grading and all this. And if you're comfortable with using Zoom, I would like to ask a few questions about you to get to know you. So please use the clapping feature on Zoom if this is your first eCOTS. So welcome to all the about 30 to 40 people who are doing their first eCOTS. Have you ever taught or graded more than 50 students? Please raise your hand. And if you've raised your hand before, please bring down your raised hand. All right, so it seems like there are a lot of you who are teaching larger class, or at least what I would define as large class. And have you ever used AI to grade? If yes, please raise your hand. And AI meaning whatever you define AI to be. Great, so there are some people who are already using AI for grading, a few, but. So I thought that during this talk, some of you, like obviously I will talk mainly about Gradescope and how AI grading works in Gradescope, but I also thought there might be people who may not necessarily like Gradescope, and I didn't want them to leave this talk without having anything. So I will talk a little bit about fair and efficient grading, and then I will introduce AI-assisted grading with Gradescope. And then for those who actually want to use Gradescope, if they haven't ever used it, I will provide some tips on how to use it efficiently, or at least things I've learned while grading. And I will keep saying grading, but I don't actually mean like assigning a letter grade or assigning points. I'm actually meaning providing feedback to students about their learning. And I'm working with a system where higher score is the desired outcome. I don't know if there are any international attendees here. And I will keep using LMS, and it just means learning management system. So if anybody is using like Blackboard, Moodle, Canvas, I use Canvas, and I will mention what Canvas and Gradescope can do together. But other LMS should be similar, I would expect. So this is my first year at UCI, teaching at UCI. And these are all the courses I have taught at UCI, and we have a quarter system. So you're seeing 3 quarters, and I'm still teaching the spring quarter right now. And as you may see that all my course enrollments noted in parentheses are varying. For instance, my basing class is quite small. I would define it to be, it's 33 people. And my current basic statistics course has 223. And no matter how large or how small my classes are, I actually use Gradescope. And I have not used it before coming to UCI. And I should give a spoiler alert. It's because we have an institutional membership. So that's how I started using it. So with or without Gradescope or any other online grading tools that we have, there are some fair and efficient grading tips that we have that helps us be fair and efficient at the same time. So one of them is like skipping over answers before starting grading. That gives us some idea of what to expect in grading. And if there are any problems, we can actually prevent it before starting. And taking breaks while grading does help avoiding rater drift. And rater drift is basically the order effect that you grade your students. The students you grade towards the end, you will not be grading them the same way you will be grading them, the ones you graded at the beginning, or most likely you will not be. And the reason is some of us, when we are grading fast towards the end, we're tired and we start actually giving higher scores towards the end. Or some people have the opposite effect. They start actually being more punitive in their grading towards the end. But if possible, we would like to take breaks to avoid rater drift. But also these breaks should not be too long, because then we forget decisions we've made about grading. So we want to take short but good breaks. And blind grading usually helps lower bias, but it may not always be possible. But I will talk about how Gradescope does this. And grading question by question usually helps, rather than just going over the whole assignment of the student. And typing feedback usually helps, not just for students understanding our feedback, like being able to read our feedback, but also for us to be able to copy paste feedback to students, or reuse feedback. And when grading as a team, assigning each team member with specific questions rather than specific students usually helps. What I mean is this: if there are 2 people grading in a grading team, rather than giving them question 1 through 6 of section 1 and section 2 separately, we can give question 1 through 3 to one grader and question 4 through to 6 to the other grader. But for those of us who actually give paper assignments, this is a challenge, because that also requires us to coordinate homework from the students, give it to first grader, and then the next grader takes it, whoever is grading. So this is a little bit challenging, especially when we have like large number of students. So I think Gradescope helps with everything I said about fair and efficient grading so far, except one. And I'll start talking about Gradescope. Gradescope basically is an artificial intelligence tool to help us grading, but you don't have to actually use AI. You can actually do classical grading with AI, Gradescope. And it was founded at UC Berkeley in an AI course. So basically AI TAs of the course decided to have AI to do the grading. And I will show a couple of questions to grade, and I will show student responses. All these student responses are actually not real responses. They're handwritten by me. So that I didn't want my students to get identified. And all the exercises I'm going to show you in a second are from our upcoming Bayesian book that I'm writing with Alicia Johnson and Miles Ott. And of course, Corona has changed everything, all the assignments we do, the way we conduct them. So I will talk, and when I submitted this talk, of course, I had in mind what I was teaching in person. So I will talk about what I do during Corona and before Corona. So before Corona, I used to give problems on paper to students. And these were like weekly quizzes in classroom, or most of my homework assignments were online. I used to give our Markdown assignments that are basically, those would be the ones that students do analysis from A to Z, from beginning to end. And then I had online assignments. But at the time, I did not use Gradescope for online assignments. It's actually a new feature. So I used to rely on Canvas for online assignments before Corona. And today, I only use online assignments feature, understandably. So the couple of assignment types in Gradescope is exams and quizzes, homework and problem sets, but these don't actually mean what you think they mean. Exam and quizzes are basically assignments that the professor uploads on students' behalf. So these are basically test kind of assignments that you collect from students and you upload them. And homework problem sets are, on the other hand, assignments that students upload. So if it's a take-home exam, it would actually fall under homework and problem set. Bubble sheets are basically multiple choice bubble sheet assignments. Gradescope provides a template. You can download it, give it to students for multiple choice questions if you have any. Programming assignments, I think the name is very clear. And we also have online assignments that I will show you in a second. So now if I can manage to share my screen, I will show you actually how this works. So this is what Gradescope interface looks like when you first enter it. And the first quarter or first semester you start using it, they will actually, the default is to start with Gradescope 101 and 202. So you can actually practice grading the first time you become a member. And I'm going to show you assignments from my demo course. And actually, I should share something else with you first. I will first show you the assignment and give you a couple of tips about starting making your assignment. So this is like a midterm I have created. It's not really one of the midterms I gave, but very important thing about grading with AI is name of the student has to be in a specific place. So you cannot really ask the student, like just give no name space, because we are going to tell AI, this is where you should be looking for name of the student and match it with the student in the class roster. This is a question with multiple choice answers. And as you may see, I have given a box here. And that's because the student is going to go ahead and write the letter of the multiple choice rather than circling it. And I can explain a little bit more on that later. And then I have one more question. This is a conditional probability question. The answer has to be some numeric number, Numeric number is 20. And then I have one more question where students are looking at Metropolis Hastings algorithm proposals, and they have to basically order proposals from largest to smallest in this part, in A section of the question, and in B part they have to explain their reasoning. As you may have realized that all the questions I have asked has some answer box, and this is very important. And this is what student submissions may look like. Their name should be on the other side, I know, but their answers are handwritten answers, and basically I would take these and scan them. And I usually tend to give names on each page because for scanning, of course, we have to unstaple the work, and it's always not too good lose any pages among 200 students' work. So I'm going to switch to the demo course now. So we are going to go ahead and grade this assignment. So for multiple choice, what's going to happen is, if you first started it, of course, I prepared for this conference because it takes time for AI to scan, like image recognize every assignment, but I have 5 students' assignments here. And this is typically how I would start with. As soon as you start this assignment, it will show you some of the students' answers. And this was the multiple choice questions. I can already see that I kind of have like A's and C's and a blank answer, but if you had 200 students, you wouldn't see that. So there are many options. So one is grading individually, which would mean you actually not rely on any AI, and you would grade this as if you would be grading any other online assignment on your LMS. And then we have the AI-assisted grading. The first option gives you basically only recognize blank answers if the student has left blank. If not, I will grade the rest myself manually. Multiple choice marks is actually when you give them multiple choice places, but I've been advised, I have never tried using this, but I've been advised not to use this by other instructors, and instead I use multiple choice questions in a box like this. It's easier to detect because for the multiple choice boxes, if students erase them, so AI recognizes 2 answers, so it's a little bit harder to detect those. For math in the blank, basically AI detects any math equation if you have asked a math equation or a number. And it also detects words like any text. So I have already run with this question with text fill in the blank option. And it has already grouped 2 students into C, 2 students have said C, 2 students have said A, and 1 student said blank. So I'm going to go ahead. So even though AI actually groups your students' answers for you, it still expects you to check its work. So I'm going to review the groups. So this is the place where actually you would see, if you are teaching a very large class, you would see all the answers that fall in the AI detected as C. I only have 2 answers. And the good part is sometimes if you're not sure, you can actually look at students like whole page. So it's not like you're just relying on that box that you provided to students. You can see the bigger picture that students has done. You can see if they took any notes on there or anything. And then you can group this group, confirm this group, and then move on to the other groups. And then you would be left with any students who are not grouped. These may be the blank students, or these may be the students that the handwriting is not legible, or any student that doesn't fall into any group, basically. All right, so this is what the grading tool will look like. It will actually bring you down, but if you notice, you're actually grading the whole group itself. So you can actually give them correct or incorrect, or you can give both. So this could be like partially correct, this, that, multiple rubric items. I'm going to go ahead. This would make more sense in the other questions. So I'll go ahead and grade another question. So this is a question with conditional policy. The correct answer to the question is 0.43. And the question specifically asks students to put 2 decimal numbers. And this usually helps to give them some instruction of so that AI can detect things easier. But clearly some students actually provided the answer as a fraction. So I'm going to go ahead and review and grade groups. So I will skip this. We've already seen this. All right, so I can go ahead and grade. And there's one student who actually provided 0.50, is not in the group, and Gradescope will ask you to confirm, like, are you sure you want to do ungrouped grading? So this group is definitely, their reasoning is correct, but I asked for 2 rounded numbers. So I could actually grade them 2 ways. And I'm going to start using keyboard shortcuts. So my rubric items are correct, reasoning correct, but not rounded. And you can see that I can actually provide LaTeX inputs to rubric items for those of you who use LaTeX in grading, providing feedback, and then I have an incorrect. So for this group, I can actually let them know that they're correct. I can provide them, I pressed 1 on my keyboard, and then I can also provide, press 2 on the keyboard as well. So this actually keyboard shortcuts make grading really efficient because I can just look at the answer and keep moving to the next. And again, even when I'm here, if I wanted to actually just see the students' work to be sure did they actually do the work, like this student just wrote the answer. But I can go to the next in the group, sorry, the next group. Sorry, I did that wrong, but you get the idea. I can see each student's work. So I'll move to this person, this group with 0.43. And remember the previous group, they were actually correct. And I took half a point off. Maybe like now I want to change my idea that maybe I took too many points off. Maybe I just want to take 0.1 points off from that group. If I change this rubric item, anyone who I have graded with that specific rubric item will change in the whole class. So that this becomes really neat if I'm actually changing my mind as I'm grading. I don't usually do that, but sometimes it becomes necessary. All right, and as you can see, I have not seen any student names, but I have, for instance, this student, the one that was ungrouped. This student, if I ever want to know student's name, I could know the student's name. That's up to me. So it does provide blind grading, but you can also check for that. And while I'm on here, I can also come to this section and provide some text input for the student directly on their. Okay, this is a horrible feedback, maybe, but you get the capabilities of Gradescope. So this is all I wanted to show on Gradescope for now. I'm going to switch to my presentation. All right. So I have showed all these features in Gradescope, but wanted to note it on my slides. I will talk briefly about programming assignments. So basically, you're running everything in a Docker container. So you have to provide certain files for the programming assignment to work. The first thing you need to provide is a setup script file, which basically is this file that you say, okay, download, install tidyverse, install this package, and so on, install R. So that's the script file you provide. And then you also provide an autograder file, which is like, so if you're giving an assignment where you're asking students to find the people who did not survive on Titanic, so you have to use the filter functions, for instance. So you have to provide an autograder file that basically says if the student has this column right, if the student has these names in this column, then give this feedback. If the students have this other column, then give this feedback. So basically you're telling AI how to grade each kind of mistake that students could have potentially done. And I have put 2 links for both the autograder, like the documentation from Gradescope, and then I also put an R autograder example from GitHub repo, not mine. I will give a couple of tips for those who would like to use Gradescope. Do use a style guide for naming your assignments, because especially if you're giving a lot of assignments, students will get lost in which assignment was which. And the interface is quite nice for figuring out like which assignment is done, which assignment is released to students, which assignment is graded, and so on. So working in teaching teams is very neat using Gradescope. And another tip is if you name your assignments consistently, so here I'm showing you midterm. This is my Gradescope midterm, but if it's also a midterm on Canvas, Gradescope can actually directly sync with Canvas, and you can actually post grades directly to your Learn LMS. One thing I really care about in educational tools is first week. As you can imagine, teaching more than 200 students is challenging. It's especially more challenging if it's students' first quarter or semester on campus, because they're trying to get used to so many tools. So I do care about what the learning curve is on the students and when I start to use a tool. One thing that makes Gradescope really neat is it actually makes signing up quite easy for students. So even if they're registering late or anything, like I have some way of making sure the student has access to Gradescope. As you may see, I have sync Canvas roster options so that I can directly get students from my LMS and they would be already enrolled on the Gradescope course, or I can add them manually by add students or staff, or I can actually give an entry code, which is on the left, which students can sign up by themselves using that. 2 tricks for managing large number of students on Gradescope is always add yourself as a student with using your personal email address. And the reason is because just like many other education tools, Gradescope does not have a student view. So you don't actually get to see what students are able to see. And another tip about handling rosters on Gradescope is remind students to use their institutional email address and make sure to check it over time. And the reason for that is you will have, only if you provide entry code yourself for students, then you will see students who do half of their work from their personal email and then half of their work from UCI and then or their institutional email. So it will become a problem. I have a couple of more additional tips about using assignments. For uploading exams and stuff, using PDF works. So for those of you who are giving HTML output in our Markdown will not work. So students have to render our Markdown to PDF, which becomes a problem with LaTeX dependencies and all that. If the assignment has certain section that is graded with a separate rubric, so if they're writing a paper, for instance, where they have an introduction, methods, results, of course, there are certain things you expect in introduction, methods, and results. Make sure to give page breaks between these sections if they're graded. And if certain items are connected together, like question 1A and question 1B, so you want to grade question 1B, but you also want to be able to see question 1A, what they responded to. So make sure that these questions are on the same page if it's possible. So for these last things I've said, basically the idea is you've seen how I can zoom into students' assignment. You want everything related to be on the same page, so that you can actually refer back to top. Even if you're just looking at a single box, you still want to see what the student has responded in the previous part. And for those who are wondering probably about students with disabilities, for timed online assignments, specific students can get extensions. So if you have any students who need extensions, that is possible. And I do not have any students with visual impairment, but I did check their website and their style, like HTML and CSS style, is accessible with screen readers. So that is also a possibility. So what I really like about Gradescope is it really minimizes the facts, like when you grade and then the student A goes to student B and says, I got 2 points lower, but I gave the exact same answer. This is less likely to happen in Gradescope because you're grouping students and each student gets a feedback based on the group they have. And we know from teaching that there are so many common misconceptions. So it's easy to provide more feedback to these specific group misconception. And I can actually have on paper assignments without having to deal with paper problems when I need to. So I don't have to carry it. I don't have to give it to readers. Like carry it as in, of course, you collect it from students, but I don't have to bring them home. I don't like give it to TAs. All the teaching team accesses it from Gradescope. The only part is scanning, and it doesn't take that much of a time. You can change scores halfway through grading. That's possible. And even after you finish grading. For online assignments, in addition to LaTeX support, there's also Markdown support for those who are using it. There's positive, negative grading. You can give group assignments. And what is great is, of course, you're still relying on AI, you're still checking it. And no matter what, no grading is perfect, but there is easy way for students to send you regrade requests. And this actually like minimizes the time students send it. The grader sees it directly, or I see it directly, and so on. LMS synchronization is quite neat. Rosters, assignments are all synced between Canvas and Gradescope. For those of you who give different versions of exams for students at different, like they get version A and B, that is possible. And I think I really love help desk of Gradescope. They are so helpful. And I think they have some agreement for institution members, like they respond to your questions within certain time frame. But there are things I do not like about Gradescope on everyday grading. One is it's an additional tool, an interface for students to learn. So I do like have to train my students how to check your grade, how to check your feedback, and how to send regrade requests. So this is still a challenge, but there is not much that can be done. But it's a little bit easier because I teach at a place where Gradescope is common. And the priority of the company is computer science instructors. So anything related to statistics will come so much later. Like there is support for Jupyter notebooks. And I'm sure there are some of you teach with Jupyter notebooks, but I teach with R Markdown, but there is no R Markdown support. So I actually grade the PDF document. And there are no reminders sent out to students about deadlines. So I have to do it manually from the Canvas page. And then there are no grading rules. I think many actually grading tools are lacking this. I cannot say rules like if students got above this, do this sort of thing. So that still becomes a manual work for me to do. And I really like doing this. If you got half correct, you'll get full points for more formative assessment types. And I put a couple of more additional resources for those who might be interested. The Gradescope roadmap is essentially, their company is sharing what features they will add. You can suggest features to them. You can vote which features should be released sooner, and so on. So you can take a look at this. And of course, I learned a lot this year just using Gradescope. And the most helpful person definitely has been Olga from Gradescope herself. She's very kind and understanding in responding. You can feel free to reach out to her. And I learned a lot from my TAs and graders, and also instructors I work with. And I think that's all I have to say about Gradescope.
Hi, Mine. Thank you very much for this very interesting talk. We don't have a lot of time for questions, but I wanted to just ask a couple. So the AI example you gave looked like you had scanned in the exams. Have you used AI with the new online assignments option in Gradescope?
Sure. So I actually skipped the online, as I did not really show an online assignment. The AI does not work with online assignment yet. So online assignment is actually in beta version, and that just started during Corona. And they're adding, actually grouping is not even available for online assignment. But they're so fast in how they handled this corona. So when online assignments started, they did not. I couldn't even see which students responded A as a group, which student responded C. But now that's possible. So I think they're developing really fast. I wouldn't be surprised if they make that happen before fall.
I just want to confirm this. I believe you said that it does automatically send grades to Canvas. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So it does integrate with Canvas. Do you know if it integrates with any other
LMS?
LMS, yes.
So I don't know, but I would guess yes. For us, it's very important that it has to be incorporated with Canvas, because otherwise it's not FERPA compliant for us. So we cannot use it, but I would assume that it would, knowing the company, I would expect them to be good with Moodle or Blackboard, at least.
Okay. So let's get one more question and then we're out of time. I think this would really revolutionize how I grade lab assignments and intro stats. We focus on concepts by hand calculations before we work in stats software. Any recommendations for grading when students must show their work?
That's good. So I think I showed one example where I say, explain your reasoning.
Right,
so,
yes.
So what I would suggest is, so you cannot completely rely on AI for a big chunk of answer. So what I would recommend is still use Gradescope, and that's what I do myself too, but give a bigger box if you're going to grade the whole work. But still, it still allows you to use grouping, right? So even if you're not relying on AI to grade, you can still put students into certain groups. At least you're saving time in providing feedback one by one. So that still saves a lot of time.
Right, because that could be quite time consuming writing the same thing over and over again.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much for such an interesting talk. We have, unfortunately, not enough time to answer the questions, but if everyone would like to continue the conversation, we have Facebook going, Twitter, Slack channel. Please post any questions there. You can also vote for this as the hot topic of the week for Wednesday if you choose. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, everyone.